What is up, you spooky bitches? We are back and we have another episode of the Hello Sidney podcast here, a podcast for horror lovers where we discuss any and all things horror. And it's me, your girl, Sidney. Happy almost end of Mike Flanagan month. I feel like it's gone by so fast and I'm so sad about it, but we've made it. I mean, we're here. This is our last Friday episode that we get, and it's exciting because we're talking about Michael Flanagan's directorial debut today. At least his like feature length debut, because he had done some short films before this, like while he was in college, and his first short film that was actually released that he's credited for was in 2006, and it was actually the short film that he ended up building on and creating Oculus from. So that had come out earlier, but this is his first directorial feature-length debut. And he was so new to the game that the funding of this movie, actually like half of it came from like Kickstarters, so like crowdfunding. And it's so funny to think about that now because of how successful he is, and like he'll never have to do that again a day in his life, which like good for him, but you got to start somewhere. So that's where he started out. So yeah, without further ado, let's just jump into it, because this movie, I will be honest, I don't think it's a bad movie, but it is not like a Flanagan level movie. Like I feel like Flanagan's modern works, like you can watch and be like, oh, this is a Mike Flanagan work, like without knowing, like if you went in blind. If I went into this blind, I wouldn't know that this was a Mike Flanagan work. But again, like it's very low budget, like he had to start somewhere. And I think the story is very Mike Flanagan-esque. And you'll see what I mean. We'll get to that at the end. But let's talk about Absentia, which came out in 2011. It's about an hour and 31 minutes long. It has a 5.8 on IMDb, which isn't terrible. And it has an 87% on Rotten Tomatoes, which is pretty damn good for a horror movie, especially a low budget independent horror film like this was. So it opens up with the credits and it says a Mike Flanagan film, the first of many. This is like the beginning of a beautiful, beautiful career. And we get the shot of a tunnel, and this tunnel is going to be kind of like in the middle of a residential street, and it just gets you from one side of the street to the other, but it is a dark, long tunnel. And we get a shot of that, and we get the title card with it. So we kind of know that we're going to focus around this tunnel here. And we cut to this woman, and this is going to end up being our main character, Trisha. And so this woman, Trisha, is going to be our main character, and we see that she's pregnant. And now Trisha is played by Courtney Bell, who actually was in a relationship with Mike Flanagan, and they do have a child together. And she was actually pregnant in this movie. So I can't 100% confirm that she was pregnant with Mike Flanagan. I think they had a son. I can't confirm. I'm guessing that she was, though. I'm thinking that this was Mike Flanagan's son that she was pregnant with at the time. But she is pregnant in the movie, and that kind of is part of the storyline. But she actually was pregnant in real life when she filmed this movie. So we see that she is hanging up these missing person posters, and she's actually taking down old ones. It's for a man named Daniel Riley, and there's some old like crumpled up ones up, and she's taking down the old ones and putting up identical new ones, so they're newer. And she's kind of walking through town doing that. And meanwhile, we cut to a house and we see another woman, who this is going to be Callie, her sister, knocking on what is going to be Trisha's front door. And she gets no response, so she kind of just like sits on the porch and waits. And eventually we can see the tunnel that we had just opened with. We can see the tunnel from the house. And she looks into the tunnel and we see Trisha, this very pregnant Trisha, walking through the tunnel. And she sees Callie and she's all excited. She goes up to her. They hug. They greet each other. Turns out they're sisters. And Callie is coming to kind of help Trisha out in like the final stages of her pregnancy. And now Callie is played by this girl named Katie Parker, and she weirdly kind of resembles Kate Siegel a little bit, if you ask me. So when this movie was created and came out, it was before Mike Flanagan knew Kate Siegel, but like, does he have a type? Like, does he have a certain casting type? Because I swear, like, when I first saw her, especially from the side profile, I'm like, damn, she looks a little bit like Kate Siegel. So Callie looks at Trisha and sees her bag full of these missing posters. And Trisha's like, it was the last of them. Like, I just wanted to get rid of them. So they get Callie set up for staying here. Like, they get her stuff ready on the futon, and she brought some gifts for the baby, and they don't know if it's a boy or girl yet. So she's like, I brought some gifts for my niece or nephew. And one of the gifts that she gives her is this little storybook, and it's I don't even remember the exact name, the Three Brothers Gruff. It's the one about like the three goats and the troll under the bridge. And this is going to be important because this whole movie is kind of going to be like a dark retelling of that fairy tale, even though the fairy tale in itself is already dark because it's about a troll eating people who cross this bridge. But it's kind of going to be like, instead of the bridge, we have the tunnel. And instead of a troll, we'll get to that. But this is kind of going to be a retelling of this kid's story. So night rolls around, they're drinking, or at least Callie's drinking, and they're just talking, and Callie's talking about how she's kind of been road tripping throughout the country. And it turns out we learn that she's in recovery. Like, she was in a clinic, she calls it, but we assume it's like a rehab, and she's in recovery, but just from drugs, because Trisha's worried about her drinking, and she's like, nope, I can handle this. It's really just the other stuff. So Callie at this point asks who the father of Trisha's baby is. So we know that Trisha's not really open about this. She hasn't told her sister who it is. And even now she avoids it. And she's just like, we'll talk about it later. And she gets up and she leaves. Like, she straight up just like disappears. Not disappears, but she just like is like, I'm not talking about this. And we learn that Callie hasn't seen her sister or been to visit her in like 5 years. And she also looks up and notices that Trisha has taken all of her wedding photos down, like off the wall. And Trisha kind of goes to talk about it. And she's like, well, at first I didn't want to change things because I thought he was going to like still come through the door. But it took a while, and eventually I just had to do it. And then Callie also notices that there is an application for death in absentia on Trisha's table. Along with that, there's a final notice for bills, like a few of them. So we're kind of piecing together that Trisha's husband went missing. He left her alone. It's been some time. We're going to find out it's actually been 7 years, and she's by herself. So she's struggling. Obviously, she's pregnant now with somebody else. But Trisha explains to Callie that it's going to help greatly if they say that Daniel is dead in absentia, because it's been 7 years. So they can file for that at this point, and it's going to help with like insurance and like his 401k, she's going to get that and stuff. So she's like, I have to just do it. I have to accept it. And she talks about the missing posters again. She's like, I just printed so many at the time, and it's kind of just habit to go out and change them at this point. But those that I just put up were the last ones. And she has the old ones that she took with her, and she starts putting them in the fire. So I think like symbolically, she's accepting the fact that like her husband isn't coming back. Her husband's been missing for 7 years. He's gone. So Callie is kind of hesitant, but ultimately she gets the courage to ask her sister, like, what do you think happened? Like, what do you think happened to him? And Trisha starts to kind of bring up all these theories. And I love the way that he does this, because as she's saying these theories, we're kind of getting a flash of Daniel acting out these theories that she has. And we're going to see this again at the end too. And I think this is meant to show how, like, if somebody goes missing or we lose somebody, we try to think anything but they're dead. Like, we truly try to believe that anything is possible except the fact that they're dead. And that's kind of illustrated here, because she goes on and she's like, well, he left because we were fighting. So I thought maybe he left and hit his head and he got amnesia and he went off and he doesn't remember me and he started a new life and he's happy. And we're getting like flashes to him, you know, with kids and like a new wife as this is happening too. And she's like, I thought he was like, I began having all these crazy theories, like maybe he was an NSA agent, but he still checks in all the time, or maybe he was kidnapped or he ran away, or aliens. Like, the first year that he was gone, it was all theories, like anything I could possibly come up with. And again, it was like anything she could come up with other than the fact that he's dead. Like, anything but he's dead is better than that. And at this point, Callie chimes in and she kind of like gives her condolences, and she's like, he was a really good person. Like, he really took me in. He was nice to me. And I really do hope that he's happy and alive. And I will help you file this paperwork and pack up, because it turns out Trisha's got to move. She's moving from this house and she's working on finding a new place. And Callie's there to help her along the way. So they go their separate ways to go to bed, and we see Trisha like light these incense, and she sits in front of her bed and she meditates. So that's something that she's been doing. And we see Callie, on the other hand, hangs a crucifix above her futon, and she gets ready for bed. And now she's still unpacking, and she pulls out this box, and she kind of like opens it and looks at it and hesitates, and she hides it under her bed. So we don't see what's in there yet, but then she gets down on her knees, like on her bed, and she prays. So So it's kind of interesting how we're seeing like the different, like the duality of spirituality here, because like Trisha has gone this more like holistic route and she's finding peace in meditation, whereas Callie in recovery has found peace in Catholicism and Jesus. So that night we cut to Trisha sleeping and she wakes up, and I say like watching this, it's not very Flanagan-esque, but the jump scares certainly are. And like the subtle scares are certainly, that's a Flanagan scare, because this point, especially like Trisha's sleeping and behind her, she's sleeping with her back to the door, which like insane behavior, right? We all know that. So she's sleeping with her back to the open door and she wakes up. And this is one of those things where you don't realize that somebody's standing there because he blends in with the background until he moves. So he's wearing like a white shirt, so he blends in with the white door and you don't see his face. You just see him from like the chest down, and whoever this is walks away and he walks out of the room. And it's at this point that you realize that there was somebody just standing there watching her. So she ends up turning over as this person is gone. So she doesn't see anything, but she obviously must have heard something. So she gets out of bed and she turns on the lights. And as she looks down the stairs, she sees a man walk by downstairs and she calls out Danny. So she thinks this is her husband, and she goes downstairs and she sees this man. He's just standing there like with his face to the wall, so she can only see his back. And there's this very tense moment where she very slowly approaches him and she goes to tap on his shoulder. And it's one of those things where she's going to tap slowly, like putting her hand out, and the camera is on him, his back, and then it's on her, and then it's on his back, and then it's on her. And then when it turns back to him, we see that he's suddenly turned around and his eyes are black. And like black eyes always fucking freaks me out. Like I don't like when people have black eyes like that, like black pupils. Like it just truly, there's something about it that's just like so unnatural and like evil and demonic to me. It really truly freaks me out. So this like actually got me. And he turns and has black eyes and he like attacks her, but she wakes up from a dream. So obviously we can see that she's kind of haunted by, I think probably the guilt of the fact that she's kind of moving on. Like she hasn't tried to look for him anymore. Like she's moving on. So the next morning, Callie wakes up and she goes for a jog, and she actually runs through the tunnel. And as she's running through the tunnel, we can see the light at the end of the tunnel, and eventually she gets into it. And as she's running, we see that she passes a bunch of signs that are posted for missing animals in the neighborhood, which red flag, and this is going to come back into play later. And she ends up finishing her run, so she runs back through the tunnel because that's how she gets home. But this time on the ground, we see that she passes this like bracelet or this like pocket watch type thing, and she doesn't notice it, but the camera focuses on it so that we notice it. And eventually she stops when she realizes there is this like decrepit, thin, unconscious man lying in the middle of the tunnel. And he's so tall that like the way he's lying, he's kind of like taking up the whole tunnel. So you would like physically need to step over him to get to the other side. And this guy is actually played by Doug Jones, who like, you might not know the name, but I promise you know Doug Jones. Like he's in a shit ton of stuff. Like he plays the zombie in Hocus Pocus. Like he usually wears a lot of makeup, so you might again not recognize his face, but he plays like the monsters and all like the Guillermo del Toro movies. Like Doug Jones is a huge actor. So like the fact that they were able to secure him when this was an independent film is a huge deal. So Callie like starts to approach this guy because she has no other option. Like that's how she has to get home. And she just assumes it's like a, you know, like a drug addict or a homeless person or something. So she kind of like doesn't think anything of it. And he straight up looks like a corpse. Like he looks fucking dead. But as she passes, we see that he's breathing. So he is alive, but he's unconscious. And she walks by and he wakes up and she sees him and she's just like, oh, sorry. And like steps over him. And he like gets up and he's like, you can see me? Which like, bitch, what the fuck? Like, yeah, I can see you. What do you mean? And she tries to leave and he just starts saying this really cryptic shit to her. Like he says, it's sleeping. It's sleeping. And she says, what? And he's like, I don't know how I got here. Trade? And Callie's confused. Like she thinks, again, this is just like a homeless person who wants food or something. So She doesn't really say a whole lot, but he introduces himself as Walter. And she ends up going to leave. And she tells him, like, I don't have anything right now. Like, I'll bring you some food later. I'll bring you some food. And she goes to leave and he starts screaming out, like, my son, Jamie, can you tell him? And Callie, like, he's getting more and more frantic. So she panics a bit and she runs away and she runs back home. So when she gets back home, she finds Trisha sitting on the couch in her living room with a detective. And this guy, his name's going to be Detective Mallory. As Callie comes in, he ends up getting up to leave and he tells the girls, like, there's been a string of robberies in the neighborhood. Like, there's one that I have to go to right now. It's not really that big of a deal because it's just a bracelet that went missing, but just like, make sure you lock your doors. And he goes to leave and he talks to Trisha and he's like, I'll call you once I'm done. And he asks if she needs anything and he doesn't finish his sentence, but he kind of like looks down at her stomach and is like, for that. And at this point, you kind of get the impression, like, is this the father of her baby? And turns out it is going to be. Spoiler alert, but this is going to be the father of her baby. And you can kind of tell in this moment. So he ends up leaving. And I love this because this is a jump scare right here. And it's very unexpected because nothing's really happening right now. But she just like says no and says goodbye to him, and she goes to close the door, and standing behind the door is this black-eyed Daniel. And in this like distorted voice, he kind of lunges at her and says, I know what you did. And she gets startled and she looks back and he's gone. So again, she's obviously like seeing visions of her presumably dead husband. So later that night, we see Callie sitting on the couch reading, and suddenly she has a realization and she's like, oh shit. And she goes to Trisha and she asks if she has any leftovers from dinner. And Trisha's like, yeah, like, are you still hungry? And she's like, no, there was this guy in the tunnel and I told him I would bring him some food later. Like, he's hungry. I think he's homeless, whatever. And she's like, it's a Christian thing because she's now obviously found this new religion and she feels like this is something she has to do, which great. So she takes the Tupperware and she goes to the tunnel, but nobody's there. So she looks around for a minute and she just like puts the Tupperware down in front of the tunnel entrance. So she goes back to the house and she's packing up some boxes to help Trisha with the move. She sees Trisha sitting on her bed, like kind of just like staring at nothing. Like, she's kind of catatonic, and Callie asks Trisha if she needs help, and Trisha's kind of like snappy towards her because Callie starts asking like about, have you found a new apartment? Have you been looking? And Trisha kind of like snaps at her. So you can tell like Trisha's just not really in a good space right now. I think, again, she has a lot of guilt for the fact that she feels like she's giving up on Daniel. So we see them go to bed. Callie goes to bed and we see Trisha asleep again. And once again, the door behind her, she's sleeping with her back to it, was slightly closed. It was like ajar, but now it creaks open on its own. And Trisha calls out thinking this was Callie, and it wasn't Callie, so nobody answers. And she just turns around and like lays back down to go back to sleep. But suddenly she finds Daniel sitting on the bed above her, and he just like attacks her and starts digging his hands into her stomach, and she wakes up gasping. So again, like, she's being plagued by these nightmares of her terrifying looking dead husband. So the next day, Trisha is with her therapist, and her therapist, obviously we can tell she must have told her therapist about what she's seeing, and her therapist is just saying like, this is actually completely normal. Like, it sounds like you're having some lucid dreams, and you're saying that they started around the time that you decided to declare him dead. Like, this is how you're processing. Like, these hallucinations are entirely normal. And how does seeing him make you feel? And Trisha's like, it makes me feel like he's devastated and he's furious because I'm declaring him dead. And he's enraged at not only me, but the baby. Like, he's pissed at both of us. And the therapist just tells her again, like, this is normal. Our mind can't deal immediately with trauma or guilt. So sometimes it creates things to help us process. Like, it will pass. So as this is happening, it's intercut with shots where we see Callie go for a run again. And of course, she once again runs through that tunnel. And when Callie gets back to the house, she sees that on the front doorstep, there's a bunch of little trinkets. It's just like a pile of like jewelry. It looks like pocket watches and like a brooch and like bracelets, like a bunch of little trinkets. And she looks like super fucking confused. So she ends up going back to the tunnel and she sees nobody in the tunnel again, but she has the trinkets in her hand and she puts them down in front of the tunnel entrance. And all of a sudden she hears a man behind her say, "Don't." And she says, "What?" And she turns around. And this is Jamie Flanagan, who is Mike Flanagan's brother, who I think also actually co-wrote this movie. And he says to her, "Don't leave those there." And she says, "Oh, like, I'm just returning them," because she's assuming that they were brought to her by the man in the tunnel for the trade, quote unquote trade, because she brought him the food. And the man just like approaches And he has this trash bag in his hand, and he leaves the trash bag at the entranceway of the tunnel. And he looks at Callie again and he says, just don't. And he walks away. So like, that's cryptic as fuck. Like, what do you mean? Why? And what did you just leave? So we cut back to Callie and Trisha, and this time they're in an office and they're giving the woman the death and absentia paperwork. And the woman looks through it quickly and she says, everything looks good. And Trisha, I just need you to sign this last line and then it's official. We can get it processed. So Trisha like takes the paper and she hesitates, and she looks up for a second and she sees Daniel standing behind the woman, but she like quickly ignores it and she looks back down and she finishes signing the paper and she hands it over. So like, it's done. And eventually they get back home and Callie says goodnight and she gets ready for bed. And as she's getting ready for bed, she's brushing her teeth, and in the sink, she sees a bug. And it's one of those, I wrote the name of it down later, so I'll see it. I can't remember it right now, but it's like a silver something. It's one of those. And I'll tell you the name later when I come across it. But she ends up like seeing it and she just washes it down the drain and she doesn't think anything of it. But then she starts to hear this like chirping noise coming from the shower behind her, and the shower curtain is closed. So she like ignores it the first time, but then she hears it again. So she starts to approach the shower curtain and she hears it a third time, and she like slowly pulls back the shower curtain to look behind it, and there's nothing. So she's like, okay, that's weird. And she just goes back to brushing her teeth, like whatever. So upstairs, Trisha is meditating again, and her therapist encouraged her to continue to do this as long as it's helping. So she's still doing this, and she hears a creak. And we get a shot of her, and behind her, we see Daniel, like ghost Daniel, standing there. And she closes her eyes and she ignores him. And then we get another angle, and now he's like directly behind her. And then we get another angle, and now he's like directly on the side of her. But she closes her eyes again, like she ignores it, and we hear him just like whispering indistinctly. And she continues meditating, and eventually when she opens her eyes, he's gone, and she smiles. So obviously like her meditating and getting into this kind of headspace is able to get her past these hallucinations that she's seeing. So she's moving on, like she's getting through this. So meanwhile, Callie is getting ready to go to bed, and next to her crucifix she hangs up a picture of Trisha's ultrasound, and she says like, good night, my niece or nephew, whatever. And she goes to lay down, but when she does, she notices all those little trinkets that she just left at the entranceway of the tunnel under her fucking pillow. So somebody was in their fucking house. So we cut to the cops now at the house. Obviously they call the cops, and they take all the trinkets as evidence. And one of the cops notices like, hey, I think some of these match the descriptions of the stuff that was taken in those B&Es in the neighborhood. And the detective, Mallory, reminds them like, lock your doors. And they're like, the door was locked. Like nobody came in. And he's like, well, there's no sign of forced entry. So somebody came in here with the doors unlocked. And now Callie tells him like there was another incident. Like I saw a man in the tunnel and he was just like talking nonsense. And that's when this shit kind of started. And the detective, Mallory, looks at Trisha and he's like, I've told you for 2 years to live anywhere but here. And she's like, I'm packing up. And he's like, to go where? You've been packing for 6 months. You know, you can come stay with me. And Trisha at this point like interrupts him and like wants him to stop, because at this point, Callie doesn't know that she's been seeing this man. This is obviously the father of her child. And it's at this point that that's pretty much confirmed for us. So they leave. We cut to the next day. Callie once again goes for a run, but this time she fully avoids the tunnel. She's like, yeah, fuck that. And eventually she gets back home and she calls Trisha, who's at work, and Trisha says she's not going to be home until 7. So Callie goes and she takes out that box that she's been hiding under her bed and she opens it, and we still don't see what's in it, but we cut. So we know that whatever's in it, Callie did something with it. So eventually Trisha comes home and she gets the mail, and Callie hears her coming in and she like kind of rushes to put eye drops in. So again, we know that like Callie obviously must have done some sort of drug here and she doesn't want her sister to know. So Trisha comes in, and it turns out the mail that she got was Daniel's death certificate. So Callie comes out to see her looking at it, and it says like it's like a death certificate, and it says on it in absentia. And Trisha is kind of like catatonic on the couch, like she realizes like this is final, like this really happened. And she goes to bed. Callie says goodnight to her, and Trisha just says nothing back. Like again, you can tell she just wants to go to bed. Like she's still processing all of this. And we end up cutting to the tunnel at night, and we see like this sort of shadow figure move in the tunnel, like down in the tunnel. And the next day, Callie goes running, and she goes running by this apartment building that has a vacancy sign. So she ends up going back home to tell Trisha, and we get this like montage of them touring a bunch of different apartments. And fun fact about this is crazy. So one of the apartments that they used for like the interior for this, so they actually like used vacant apartments, and the first one that they go into was the first apartment that Mike Flanagan lived in when he moved to Los Angeles when he was young. Like, he lived there with like 4 other people. Like, he had a bunch of roommates, and it turns out that the apartment complex that he lived in had a vacancy. And when he was like scouting for locations for filming, he's like, oh, perfect. Like, can we use one of these? And it happens that the vacancy happened to be the one that he lived in, which like, I think that's so cool. And like, I believe in like signs from the universe. And I really think that was a sign of like, look at where you started and look at where you are now. And like, he obviously didn't know at the time, but like, look where you're going to go. Like, I think that's so crazy. So they go to all these like open houses and look at all these apartments, and Trisha ends up calling Detective Mallory and telling him that I found a place. And she's finally happy. Like, you can tell she's happy, and she asks him like, so do you want to finally go out? And you can tell that he's been asking her out for a while, and she's been saying no, but he's all excited, and he's like, yes, of course I want to go out. So we kind of are getting this intercut with shots of her taking her wedding ring off and putting it in a drawer along with her and Daniel's wedding picture and Daniel's death certificate. So she's like, again, finally accepting that Daniel is gone. She's moving on, and Trisha and Callie are packing. So they're getting ready for her to leave this house that she lived in with Daniel. And Callie helps her pick out an outfit for her date, and she gets ready. So Detective Mallory shows up to pick Trisha up, and the two of them go to leave. And as they're leaving, Trisha sees Daniel standing in the street, and she looks at him and she looks away because she knows that she's just seeing things, like she's still having this guilt and she's hallucinating. And all of a sudden, Detective Mallory stops, and he's like, oh my God. And he's staring at Daniel because it turns out this isn't a hallucination. This is the real Daniel, and he's come home after 7 fucking years. And he just is like, no, like Detective Mallory is like, no, like there's no fucking way. And we cut to Daniel, and we see he's like all disheveled. He's a little bloody, and he starts walking towards them, and then he starts running, and he like falls to the ground and collapses. And the detective runs over to him and tells Trisha to call an ambulance, but Trisha ends up fucking collapsing too because she's so in shock. And like, Callie comes out at this moment and catches her, and we cut to the hospital. So Daniel's in the hospital, and Trisha ends up calling Ruth, who is Daniel's mother. And she's like, I don't know how to say this, but like, Daniel came back. Like, he's here. He's in the hospital. And now this is intercut also with David in the hospital, or I'm sorry, Daniel in the hospital being examined, and he's like white as a ghost. And he looks at the doctor and he asks, you can see me? So this is exactly what Walter asked Callie in the tunnel. So like, what the fuck is going on in this tunnel? And the doctor tells Trisha that they're going to treat him for dehydration, malnutrition. And he hasn't said anything. He hasn't spoken except for the you can see me part. And Trisha tells Callie that Daniel's mom on the phone was laughing. Like, she's like in shock. She can't believe it. And Callie is like, did you tell her about the trauma that they say he's been through? And Trisha's like, no, like she doesn't need to know about the assaults that he's been through. And we see that the detective is talking to Daniel, and he's like, we need to figure out where you've been because the doctor says that you show signs of significant physical abuse. Like, what happened to you? You've been missing for 7 years. And Daniel just looks at the detective and says, I was underneath. And the detective is like, where? What do you mean? And Daniel kind of like passes out or falls asleep or whatever. He's obviously exhausted. So eventually some time passes, and Daniel comes home, and he gets out of the car, and he turns and he looks at the tunnel, and he pees his pants. So like, obviously he is so frightened of this tunnel. And Trisha and Callie kind of play it off in that, like, obviously he isn't well. So they take him in, they get him changed, and Trisha goes to put Daniel to bed, and he lays in bed and he smiles, and Trisha like touches his face. Like, obviously she's happy for him to be home, but like, what the fuck? Like, where have you been? So Trisha ends up telling Callie that Daniel's parents will be here tomorrow. And now the doorbell rings, and it's the detective and his partner. So it's 2 detectives, and they come in and they're like, we want to talk to Daniel again. And suddenly they hear footsteps like thudding upstairs. So Trisha goes upstairs to check, and she sees that he's out of bed. He's nowhere to be found in that room. So she goes into another room, and she finds him in the fetal position in the corner. And Obviously, this man is fucking terrified of something. Like, he's terrified of being back. Like, he's terrified of being fucking alive pretty much at this point. So Trisha ends up getting him back in bed, and the detectives come in and talk to him. And Detective Mallory is like, the doctor called and they told us that you had animal bones in your stomach, and the clothes that you were wearing were the same clothes that you left in 7 years ago. Like, you haven't been to a shelter, like you haven't done anything. And Daniel is just like, I don't know. He's just like, I don't know. And the detective is like, well, somebody fed you as recently as yesterday morning, and you still had your wallet. Like, 7 years on these streets and nobody took your wallet. And he's starting to kind of get angry. And you can tell, like, there's obviously a personal level involved here, because, like, I got your wife pregnant. You were supposed to be gone. Now you're back. Like, you're ruining everything. What the fuck? And he gets angry to the point where Mallory's partner kind of like tells him to calm down. He's like, dude, chill the fuck out, and telling him that, like, we should leave. And Daniel's like upset and he's crying at this point. And as they're leaving, Detective Mallory asks Trisha, like, can you talk tonight? Like, please, I'm begging you. And finally she agrees. She's like, yep, you can come back tonight. We can talk. That's fine. So Callie ends up checking on Daniel, and he's like sitting just catatonically in bed. And he looks at Callie and he's like, you disappeared too. And Callie is like, yeah, but I was chasing a guy. Like, so he's talking about her disappearing, like when she ran away from home when she was younger and she started like going all over the country and doing everything. And he asks her, how did you get out? And she says, I don't know. And obviously, like, they're talking about two different things, but like, not entirely. Like, how did you get out of that cycle? So Trisha ends up coming in and interrupting, and Callie leaves. And Trisha finally, like, kind of breaks down at this point, and she starts crying and shaking her head, and she looks at Daniel and she's like, well, and he says nothing. And she pulls out the death certificate and is like, I fucking declared you dead. And he points at her stomach, because obviously he realizes, like, you're pregnant. And she fucking, like, she gets pissed and she just like slaps the hell out of him, and she starts hitting him, and she just starts screaming, like, where the fuck were you? Where the fuck were you? And eventually he kind of just like holds her and hugs her, and she just cries in his arms. And like, how frustrating is that after 7 years? And like, you finally after 7 years are able to start moving on and living your life again, and this motherfucker comes back and doesn't say anything about where he was. Like, that is so frustrating. So we cut to Callie, and we see that she can kind of hear this whole thing. Obviously, it's not really a big house. And by the way, the apartment that they are filming this in, I believe, is actually where Mike Flanagan lived at the time. So like, he didn't have to pay to like be on location anywhere. Like, he just filmed at his own home, which, like, I love that. That's like a true independent horror movie. It's the same way Paranormal Activity was made. So Callie hears this, and we see her open this mysterious box once again, and we still don't know what's in this box. But we end up cutting to Detective Mallory outside, and Trisha goes outside to meet him, and they sit in a car together, and he tells her, like, I'm devoted. I will never leave. I will protect you. I will protect our baby. Like, I'm still the same, but he's not. Talking about Daniel, of course. And he's like, and things weren't really great for you then when he was the same. And she kind of like interrupts him and is like, oh, come on, stop. And he's like, listen, that death certificate was accurate even if he's upstairs. So essentially, like, that is not the same person. The person you knew died. And I mean, fuck, like, he's kind of right. And now inside we see Callie wake up, and she sees Daniel sitting on her bed, like on the edge of her bed. And she kind of like gets startled, and he's reading the Troll Under the Bridge book, like the Brothers Gruff book. And he just looks at Callie and he says, that's not what it looks like. It's more like an insect, and it has skin like silverfish. That's the name of the bug. So this is the bug that was in the sink earlier. So like, now we're kind of putting together, like, what do you mean it has skin like silverfish? And what are the odds that a silverfish would be in my sink? Like, that's kind of weird. And Daniel looks at her and he's like, you traded with it. And I wish you didn't, because it fixates. And Callie's like kind of freaking out at this point, and she starts calling for Trisha, but of course Trisha's outside, so she can't hear. And Daniel is like, I can't go back into that bedroom because it's in one of the walls in there. Maybe it'll go away. And he kind of like looks off into the distance, and suddenly he jumps because he hears this chirping noise. And it's the same chirping noise that Callie had heard earlier in the bathroom. And both of them see this like animalistic figure. We don't see the whole thing, but we see this like animal-like figure, and we know it's an animal because it's on all fours, and it runs by the doorway. And they both kind of jump back, and Daniel cries, and he's like, no more, no more, no more. Like, he obviously has been followed by this thing for however long. And now Callie goes to investigate, and she hears that chirping noise again, and she follows the noise to the bathroom, and she once again goes to check the shower. But this time, as she's going to pull back the shower curtain, we see something come out the opposite side of the shower curtain, and it doesn't come out, so we don't see what it is. It goes like through the shower curtain and like grabs her, like kind of like loops around and grabs her from the other end, and the camera cuts to black, so we don't see exactly what happened here. Now, back in the car, Trisha's still there, and she tells the detective that she can't see him anymore. And I'm so sorry, like I can't see you anymore, but you will always be involved, and you always said that you would bring him back to me, and you did, and I love you for it. And she starts to go into the story about how when she was younger, she used to camp, and she kind of used to like get up, and that was kind of like her escape from the world. Like she used to just like get up and not tell anybody and just like go camping and be outside and be like one with the wilderness and one with nature. And they end up kissing, and he leaves, and he kind of like accepts like, fuck, your husband's back. It is what it is. So he leaves, but then as she goes back to go into the house, she notices that the front door is open. So she calls him back, and he runs inside, and suddenly Callie comes running out the fucking front door before he can even get inside. And she's shouting, she's screaming, he's gone. And she's screaming and she's crying. And Detective Mallory goes in, and he sees the house in like complete disarray. Like furniture's flipped over, and he asks Callie what happened. And she looks at him, and we cut to black. And now we get a flashback, and we see Callie wake up in the bathroom. So obviously after she was grabbed by, but whatever she was grabbed by, she wakes up in the bathroom, and she turns to see Daniel crawling out of the room, like out of the room that she's staying in. And this creature runs by and just like drags him away by his feet. And she starts to follow him downstairs. She chases him, and the living room is just like in complete disarray. That's what Detective Mallory just saw. And she sees like all of a sudden she follows him, but Daniel's gone. But she looks up, and she kind of sees like, you know, in Nightmare on Elm Street when Freddy Krueger is like coming through the wall, and like you don't actually see him, but you see like the shape of him coming through the wall, like he's like literally bending time and space. That's what's happening on the ceiling. Like it sounds like Daniel because he's screaming, and he's kind of just like coming through the wall, but you don't actually see him. But then eventually we do see him, and he's just like, he looks like he's lying on the ceiling, like he's laying up on the ceiling. And suddenly he drops to the ground, and whatever creature or animal this is drags him by the feet out the front door, out the open front door. And that's why the door is open. So Callie continues to chase him down the street, and she sees him being pulled into the tunnel. And now we get this like shaky camera footage, like as if we're getting a POV of us running. And we see this like skinny figure. She's running towards Daniel in the tunnel, and we see this like skinny figure holding him up against the wall. And we cut back to Callie, and she starts to hear like screams coming from inside the wall, but he's gone. So it's like he was absorbed into the wall. And now I messed up. When I said Callie came running out of the house, she didn't. She came running out of the tunnel, and this is when she came out running, telling them he's gone. So she's telling this to the Detective Mallory, and at this point he's called back up, and like his partner's here as well, and they don't believe her. And they look at her eyes, and they're like, do you see her eyes? So like they know that she's high, so like whatever's been in that little fucking box has obviously been drugged. So she's not clean like she told Trisha, so she's high as fuck. And the other detective, like Mallory's partner, says to him like, I don't love that you were here tonight, like, but I need a statement, and do you want me to take her report talking about Trisha? And Mallory says, no, I'll do it. So he goes up to Trisha, and he sits with her, and he hesitates, but he's like, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I need you to file a missing persons report. And she just cries. So it's like this whole thing is just fucking starting over again. Like we literally just did this for 7 years, and now we gotta fucking do it again. And now eventually they leave, and Callie apologizes to Trisha, and Trisha like yells at her to shut up, which like, bitch, you were outside canoodling with your other man. Like, don't fucking blame this on your sister. Like, fuck off. I get she's mad because because Callie's high. Like, I get that point. And Callie tries to tell her, like, I promise you, like, I saw it. Like, I saw something. And Callie is like, no, you hallucinated it because you're having a fucking acid trip. Like, you're hallucinating shit. And Callie is like, well, you were gone doing whatever. So like now they're kind of going back and forth and they're fighting. And we cut to them kissing in the car because Trisha kissed Detective Mallory. And we cut to them kissing in the car. But this time when they separate, we see Daniel standing in front of the car watching them. And he goes back inside and like flips the furniture and walks out of the house. So now kind of like in the beginning when Trisha was going through all of these possibilities and all of these like what ifs, we're going to kind of get that here and we're going to get that later in the movie too. So it's like, okay, maybe he wasn't dragged away by a creature. Maybe he saw his wife kissing this man and went in a fit of rage, flipped the furniture and just walked off on his own. Like maybe that's a possibility. And that's better to believe than a creature dragging him off into the night. So Trisha is like, I've heard your giant bug story before, but last time they were crawling on your skin when you were fucking high. And sure enough, she goes and she finds that box that Callie's been hiding this whole time, and there are indeed drugs in there. So they argue back and forth, and they kind of like both say mean shit to each other until eventually Trisha straight up slaps Callie in the face. And it's when Callie starts to talk about like, well, at least I didn't marry some high school boyfriend that I didn't even, and before she even can finish that sentence, Trisha just slaps the fuck out of her. So we cut to the next day and everybody's just really somber, and Trisha ends up calling Ruth, Daniel's mother, but it goes to voicemail and she hangs up before she's able to even say anything. So meanwhile, we see Callie starting to research stuff because she obviously knows that something sketchy is going on. And she starts to Google these missing persons. And she goes to Trisha and she apologizes to her. They kind of apologize to each other. They make up. And Callie is like, I think I can make some sense out of this. And she pulls up what she's found. And she shows Trisha this missing persons report of Walter Lambert. And of course, this is the guy that she saw in the tunnel. And she explains how he lived 3 doors down from us. He went missing in 1995 and he was last seen walking through the tunnel, and his son says that his dad was taken away by a monster and he was declared dead in 2002, but I ran into him a few days ago. And there have been 5 others from this neighborhood in the last 100 years that have gone missing like this. And before the tunnel, like before it was a tunnel, it was a natural sinkhole, and more people went missing before that too. And she tells this story about how in the 1920s this man crossed the bridge and his footprints led halfway to a well and then just like disappeared. And then there's this other story about how these students went missing in this underground cave, but eventually they emerged through this long tunnel. And the students said that the cave was under the city, but it wasn't just like a regular cave. It was like an underworld. And then in 1968, there was another story. This man was at a party 3 blocks down from here, and he wandered into a yard saying that it's after him. And overall, in the whole country, there's 109,000 active missing persons cases at any given time. So where are all these people going? Are they going underground? Are they in these tunnels? And this is something that genuinely scares me because I do think there is some truth to this. Like if you've ever seen that map, and I don't know how accurate this is, but I wouldn't doubt it. Like how a lot of missing persons are situated around where there's a lot of cave systems. And that like really freaks me the fuck out. Like where are you? Where'd you go? Like, it just scares me, like, to think of how people can just vanish into thin air, especially in this day and age where everything's on camera, everything's recorded. Like, how do you just simply vanish? And, like, where are you? And how is nobody seeing you? It really fucking trips me up. So Trisha is trying to kind of be the logical one here. And she's like, you know what? My therapist says that our mind creates patterns to cope. And she starts, like, repeating things that, like, her therapist said to her earlier. But Callie continues on and she's like, every culture has mythology about spirits, and these spirits like take people away, like whether they call them trolls or insects or demons or the Wendigo. Like there is a common thread here, and there's like dark matter and tangential dimensions, and things go missing in this neighborhood and they all turn up in one place. And she's talking about obviously the fucking tunnel. And suddenly there's a knock on the door, and Trisha opens the door and it's Daniel's parents, and they're all happy and they're like, where is he? Which, like, this fucking sucks, like, as if it's not bad enough. And Trisha tells him to sit down. And eventually we cut to the parents crying and Trisha crying. So obviously we know that she told them. And we see Callie asleep. And eventually that night she wakes up to the sound of sirens. And the detective starts banging on the door. And Trisha answers the door. And he tells her, hey, I need to speak with your sister. We found a body in the tunnel and we need her. And before that sentence even leaves his mouth, Trisha's running to the fucking tunnel because of course she thinks it's Daniel. And she gets to the tunnel and there's a crowd around it, surrounded by this crowd of people. And she sees this like bloody body, and we don't fully see it yet, but Trisha runs through the police tape and Callie follows. So she left the house, she ran after her, and Callie looks at this body and she says, "That's Walter Lambert." And we cut to the body and we see that it's all like bloody and mangled. And all of a sudden we hear a man begin screaming, and we turn and we see it's the man from earlier, and he drops a trash bag. So remember, he had come in, left a trash bag at the entryway. So he drops a trash bag and he just starts screaming and crying to the point where the police like restrain him because he's like fucking causing a scene. And they open the trash bag and they see that there's a fucking dog in there. Like there's a little dog in this trash bag. So this guy has been coming here and feeding the thing that lives in the tunnel, or at least feeding the people that live in the walls of the tunnel. So we cut to them arresting this man, and Callie and Trisha are watching. And then we cut to this man being interrogated in the police station, and it turns out Walter was his father. So earlier when Walter had said my son Jamie, which Jamie Flanagan is actually his real name, so he's like, my son Jamie. So this was his father, and Jamie is just distraught, and he's telling the cops, like, I told you he wasn't dead. And like the cops at this point realize that he was right, and they're like, oh yeah, like sorry about that. And they also bring up how there's been a lot of animals disappearing from this neighborhood. Like, why did you have a dog? And what about those break-ins? Like, can you account for your whereabouts during that? And he just is like not being helpful at all. He's like, I just want to go to sleep. And they're like, please, like, give me anything, Jamie, like fucking help us out here. And Jamie's like, well, no, I came to you for help and you couldn't help me, but you can help me get out of here so I can bury my father. Like, that's all I want to do right now. So we cut back to Callie, and she goes to sit with Trisha, and Trisha's meditating, and she kind of starts to teach Callie how to meditate too. She's like, this has been really helping me a lot. And Callie starts to tell Trisha how in the church, like in Christianity, some people are called victim souls. And essentially, like, God lets the demons do their thing, and these people are like destined for torment. Like these souls that like are taken over by the demons, they're destined for torment, but there's some great reward in heaven, and that's apparently what they're working towards. And they kind of like apologize to each other for everything that they've said, and they kind of make up, and they end up going upstairs together afterwards, but they hear a chirping noise coming from downstairs, and they pause and they hear it again, and they like look into the darkness, and it's literally just like pitch black darkness. Like we don't see anything else, but they look into the darkness, and suddenly we don't exactly see the characteristics of this creature, but we do see a creature just burst out of the darkness, and the camera cuts. And now we cut to the detectives in the police station, and they're reviewing missing persons cases when Callie comes in completely shaken up, and she is like sweating, she's shaking, and they have her in an interrogation room, and we see that there's no dialogue, but we cut back to what just happened, and we see that whatever creature this was that burst out of the darkness dragged Trisha away into the darkness, and Callie was like holding on to her, trying to get her back, trying to pull her back, and eventually she's dragged to the tunnel, and she's at the opening of the tunnel, and Callie is like holding on to her until she can't hold on anymore, and she lets go, and this creature drags Trisha away into this tunnel. And we cut back to the police station, and Detective Mallory is fucking pissed because obviously like this was my girl and my fucking baby. And he's like, you think I haven't heard about you and the company that you keep? Like, what I think this was a deal gone bad, and now you're making up this shit to cover your own ass, pretty much. And the other detective stops him from getting angry, and he tells Callie, like, we're gonna have to test your blood and question you a lot more, and like, you're a person of interest, so you can't leave town, and we need you to file a missing persons report. So again, the shit is just starting all fucking over again. And eventually the detective drives Callie home, and as she gets home, it's now light out, and she prints out all of these articles about the missing people that she read about, and like the legends that she read about, and she prints them all out, and she puts them in this big manila envelope along with the troll book, the Brothers Gruff book, and she marks the envelope Mallory, for Detective Mallory, and she prays, and she looks outside, and she cries, and we get a shot of outside, and at this point now it's getting dark. So it's getting dark, and Callie walks outside, and she leaves her front door open, and she walks towards the tunnel, and she goes in, and she says out loud, "Trade." And now she's standing in the tunnel, and she looks around, and nothing happens. So she says it again, "Trade." And once again, nothing happens. So she says it again, and on the third time, she starts to hear yelling. It's like faint at first. And it's like the sound of men and women yelling, but it's coming from inside the walls in the tunnel. So she once again shouts out trade. And at this point, the screaming gets louder. And she also starts to hear these like squelching noises. And this part, my God, she turns, and we don't get a full view of this. It's almost like a blink and you'll miss it type thing. But she turns, and what she sees is a fucking unborn fetus on the ground. Like, that's what their trade was. Like, oh, I won't give you your sister back, but I will give you her fetus, which is fucking dead. Like, the fetus is on the fucking ground. It's like actually pretty horrific. And then she just starts to hear this like loud noise. And at this point, Callie is horrified and she starts running back outside of the tunnel, and the noise increases, like it's getting closer and like it's chasing her. And she finally gets to the end of the tunnel. But as she goes through the doorway to the tunnel, her shoe just leaves. So we like cut to black and we just see her shoe roll out of the tunnel. So whatever is living in that tunnel, she now belongs to it. And her shoe just rolls out and it's the only thing left. And now we cut to the next morning and we see that the shoe is still there. And the detectives obviously find out that she's gone. And Mallory goes into the house and he finds the file that is marked for him. And he starts looking through everything. He sees like the newspaper articles and the reports and the Brothers Gruff book. And on the cover of the book, it's written by Callie, of course, beware the things underneath. Beware the things underneath. And Mallory ends up talking to his partner, and his partner is saying like, we'll keep the case open indefinitely. Like, it's not about speculating. It's about what we know and what we don't know. So we don't know that anything bad happened yet. And now we cut to Detective Mallory putting up missing persons posters. So like what we saw in the beginning, like that's now become him. And now at this point, they're starting to go over all these possibilities. And it's kind of like the possibilities when Trisha talked about what could have happened to Daniel in the beginning. So as they're speaking, like it's intercut with images of what could have happened. So like the partner is saying, you know, they were living near someone with textbook signs of a serial killer. So we cut to like an image of Jamie killing Callie, like him killing Callie, and that's what would have happened. And the detective is like, we know that there were bills piling up and she could have gone off to live on the land because she used to camp all the time, like she told you that, and she could be fine. Like now Detective Mallory is saying this. He's like, she could be living off the land, she could be fine. And the other detective is like, well, there is her sister. And Mallory's like, well, she's always been a runaway, like maybe they took off together. And like they're again going through all these possibilities, and as they are, we're seeing images of it. So we're seeing like Trisha and Callie like walking down the street together. We're seeing Trisha off living on the land on her own. And Detective Mallory is like, no, I won't think the worst of her, not of her, and not of them. And we see he's putting up missing persons posters, and it's not just for Trisha, it's actually for both of them. So they're both on the poster together. And he turns towards the tunnel and he sees a woman standing there, and we see that it's Callie. We know it's Callie because she's wearing like the same outfit she's been wearing like pretty much this whole movie. And Detective Mallory approaches and goes up to the tunnel, and he looks in and he sees no one there. So he turns and he starts to walk away, and we cut to inside the tunnel as if we're getting a POV of him walking away. And inside the tunnel, we see the silhouette of a woman who, of course, we know this must be Callie because we just saw her. And we see this woman watching him as he walks away, and this insect-like creature moves on her and makes that chirping noise, and the movie ends. Wow. Okay. So let's talk about this Brothers Gruff book, right? So basically, I don't remember reading this book as a kid, so I actually had to like look up a summary and see what it was about. So essentially, it's these three goats, and they're brothers, and they trick the troll that's under the bridge. So everybody's scared to cross this bridge because the troll will like literally eat you. Like if you try to cross this bridge, the troll that's underneath the bridge will eat you. So they decide that they're going to trick the troll. And the first brother goes over the bridge and he says, like the troll comes out and is like, I'm going to eat you. And the brother's like, well, my brother's coming and he's fatter, so you should wait for him. And the troll's like, okay, that's not a bad idea. So he goes, and then the second brother comes along and he's like, the troll's like, I'm going to eat you. And he's like, no, my third brother's coming along and he's fatter. Like you should wait for him. And the troll's like, okay, great idea. Like go ahead. So they both cross the bridge, and then the third brother comes, and the third brother's the biggest, and he doesn't pull that shit. Like he doesn't say the same thing, but instead I guess like a fight ensues between the two of them, and he's able to like throw the troll off the bridge or something and drown him. So they all make it across. All three brothers make it across. So this is another retelling, and I think for that reason, that's why there are three main characters who go missing here. We have Daniel, we have Trisha, and we have Callie. And now I think Callie is like the final brother. Like she represents the final brother. And while she didn't defeat the creature, I think she is the one that had it figured out. Like she was the one that was understanding about like the dimensions and the trade. And she was onto something. And I think that's almost why she's able to kind of like show herself to people, and she's able to watch these people. Like she's not completely stuck in the walls like the other ones are. And I think in that way she kind of won. And I like to think that maybe she's like living with her sister, like somewhere in those walls. And I don't know, this whole thing is really freaky to me because, like, again, the conspiracy theorist in me, if that's what you want to call it, or maybe it's just something in me that believes that there's way more on this earth than we could ever truly understand. I do believe in stuff like this. Like I believe in different dimensions. And I do think that some people who go missing truly like slip into different dimensions. So I don't think they're necessarily dead. I think they're like living elsewhere. And maybe it is a situation like this where we can't see them. And like imagine how truly heartbreaking that is. And like I think that's why like when Daniel and this guy said like you can see me, like they were so shocked because I think they've been living this whole time. They've been living these 7+ years and they've just been watching from afar. Like they're watching from inside the walls or they're watching from underneath. So for that reason, I like this movie because I have never seen an interpretation of a story like this. Like this is really the first. It's a unique story, and I think it's a really interesting take on like the kids' fairy tale, and I think it's really thought-provoking, and it makes you think about like when people go missing, where do they go? And like I don't know, I think there's some truth to every form of media. So that's Mike Flanagan's directorial debut, and I think honestly for a directorial debut it's pretty damn good. There's some good jump scares in here. I think the story is really good. The acting is really good. Like he found like seasoned actors, you can tell. Like it's not like some independent horror films you watch, you're like, oh my god, have these people even like had human interactions in their lives? Like truly this is fucking concerning. Like who are you people? But there's actually good actors in this, and I think it's a really good storyline. I think it's really interesting. I would love to see Mike Flanagan remake his own movie though, being the person he is now, because I feel like he's come such a long way, just like in his storytelling, in his cinematography, and how he does everything. And I think this story can definitely be like expanded on and explained more and elaborated on. And I think he could do such a great job at that. So like Mike Flanagan, if you're ever listening, why the fuck would he be listening? Go remake Absentia. I really think I would love to see like a remastering of Absentia, or like expanding on the story, like not even a sequel, but just like something else in that universe, because I love this idea of like, again, missing people and like different dimensions and underground, like being in the underworld and in these tunnels and like being tormented souls and everything. Like I really think that's a cool and really terrifying idea. So if somebody can get Mike Flanagan's ear, elaborate on that story. I can't wait to see Life of Chuck, by the way. Everybody I know that's seen it is absolutely raving about it. And I've read the short story Life of Chuck, and I think like it's going to make an excellent movie, and there is no better person to do it than Mike Flanagan, because it's very existential, it's very deep, and I think it's going to be arguably the best movie of the year. So I'm so ready for it. That's Absentia, guys. That is Mike Flanagan's directorial debut. If you haven't seen this movie, it is on Tubi for free, and other than like the few jump scares and like the black eyes, like it's not really that scary. So like if you listen to these because you can't watch scary movies, I would say like I think you can probably handle this one, like especially if you know where the jump scares are coming. So go check it out. It's our Lord and Savior's first debut, so for that reason it's important. But on Wednesday we're going to be talking about Before I Wake, and I haven't rewatched it yet, and I'm honestly scared to, because I've only ever watched that movie once and it like emotionally destroyed me. So like I know I'm going to be an absolute fucking wreck, but for you guys, I'm willing to do it. So we will be talking about Before I Wake on Wednesday, and that will wrap up our Flanagan month, which like I feel like it's gone by so fast. It's so sad. But until then, you guys know where to find me. It's horror_chronicles on TikTok and Instagram. I post every day, so you can keep up with me there. And until next time, watch more horror movies and stay spooky, my friends.